Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Phil Newman. I'm the editor-in-chief of Longevity.Technology, and today's Investing in the Age of Longevity is a webinar hosted by Master Investor. Now, this forms part of the 2024 Longevity Week, which has been happening all week in various locations around the UK. And today we're splitting our program into two sessions. We've got what I kind of broadly call Longevity Next, which is the future of longevity investment, kind of higher risk and higher reward. And then we're going to be moving into Longevity Now, which is those companies that are forming part of the longevity economy with identifiable revenues and likewise possibly a lower risk profile. So we have a real stellar cast of speakers today, and I would encourage you, if you feel brave enough, to use the Q&A channel to pose questions. I'll do my very best to keep a track of your questions and then bring those into play if there's time at the end of each session. And delighted to say we've also got a panel session at the end of today. So if we don't get your questions in early, then we'll try and address those later in the session. So I don't know if many of you know Longevity.Technology, but we are an organization that's been working in the longevity space for quite a while. And I'm going to take this opportunity to, first of all, share with you our overview of the longevity market, both from an investment perspective, but also share with you our new classification that we've been working on for the work that we're doing in analyzing the industry. So let me just take you through some key slides to get things started. There's my QR code. So if any of you would like to contact me or would like a copy of my slides, I'm sure the Master Investor team will make that possible as well. But likewise, there are my details if you'd like to reach out to me. Please feel free to do so. So first of a little bit of a homage back to the team at Juvenescence. We've got Greg Bailey joining us today from Juvenescence. In fact, it was Juvenescence's Series A round of $50 million back in 2018 that was my trigger of getting into this sector. I first heard of the term anti-aging back at that point, and I was actually doing a 500-kilometer, 24-hour bike ride in Norway at the time. That's me asleep, literally asleep in a lay-by in Norway. That was the beginning of my longevity journey, and I'm sure some of you are perhaps dialing in for the first time to learn more about this very exciting sector. So the way that we look at the industry is across business and science news. So we have Longevity.Technology. We also have an investment portal and likewise a lot of work going on in consumer education, and talk to you later about what we're doing with our investment activities as well. So looking at 2024, where are we? Well, I'm sure most of you are aware through the media that people are talking about longevity very significantly now in the space. We've got influencers coming into the space, but likewise, we've got big corporates coming in too. And I'll talk later about what's happening in the field of the big pharmaceutical companies as well, because they're part of this industry as we have it standing now, but likewise very much part of its future. So some big numbers on my screen here. So what is the longevity industry and how do you count it? And of course, we all like big numbers and charts that go in the right direction. But many people look at the industry across very different scopes. So whether it's longevity supplements or retirement homes or even luxury cruises, the key thing is how big is this sector and how do you actually analyze it? So that's what we do. We analyze the industry across 25 different domains. You can see them all here. These toggle between the longevity now and the longevity next aspects of the industry, as I mentioned earlier. And we publish annual reports and quarterly reports about the space. And I'm going to take you through some of the details that came out of the first half of 2024 report that we've just published. So you can see here that 2021 was really a breakout year for longevity investments, just over $10 billion. And interestingly, you can see that there's a toggle between 2021 activity and the drop off in 2023 in terms of investment activity and what that looked like in terms of company formation. So even though there wasn't necessarily the capital flows that we would have expected, there was still a lot of activity in the formulation of companies in the space. Very pleased to say that things are very much back on track for 2024. You can see here that this is the first half 2024, which when you combine it with the second quarter of 2024, those two combined actually made up more investment than the whole of last year. So things are very much moving in the right direction for the industry from a investment perspective. And you can see from those 25 domains that I just shared with you earlier that in fact it's longevity discovery platforms in Q1 that were the breakout category for attracting investment, $1.4 billion. And I would say, in many respects, the longevity discovery platforms, which are those companies that are, excuse me, using AI to discover unique molecules and using AI in silico, in computer, to be able to identify whether they have potential efficacy in humans in the future, they have been a very big category for many years in the space. And it's very interesting to me that when you look at the second quarter of 2024, that in fact it was then actually a category of neuropharma that overtook that. And that's kind of a trend that we're seeing in the space now because these AI discovery platforms are putting out a lot of assets, but you've got to do something with those assets. As I'll talk with some of our presentations today, the key thing is that it's how you take those assets through the clinic. And when you get those into the clinic, which means that they're going to be put in humans, are they going to be proving safety, both safe and efficacious? So the trend is moving around to swinging around to assets now, which I'll be talking about with Greg Bailey, I'm sure later. But when you look at the scope of the industry, it's a very exciting industry. It's confusing for many, whether you've got a single asset like a neuropharma asset like NeuroBio in the top corner there, or even a group like Human Longevity, who are a clinical group using full body MRI and other diagnostics to help people at a clinical level. There's a lot going on in the space, and it is quite confusing. And I have to say, I've got a role in trying to help clarify it, but likewise, my own journey was part of that spaghetti, which is the fact that obviously this is an interesting space, but it is highly confusing to people. So we have recategorized longevity across the 10 levels that you can see here. And I'm going to take a spin through each of these levels so you can identify how we've categorized them, but likewise where we see the investment opportunities for them. So all good longevity theory starts with the basics. So this is managing our diet, sleep, exercise, and so forth. And there are a lot of organizations in this space, as you can imagine. And this is everybody from the big players like Apple and Google through to other wearables like Aura and others like Ultrahuman that are helping us understand our behavior, whether it's our sleep or our exercise. The key thing is that actually this is moving into a trend now where there are opportunities for companies backing into that infrastructure, not to take on Apple and Google, which is going to be very hard to do. But as you can see here, working with helping people get that information into the systems in a much more efficient way. Some of those biomarkers that they've got, perhaps where they're doing a blood draw, for example, how you get that into your Apple app. And likewise, how organizations can use AI now to really hyper-personalize the way that this information is interpreted from a personal level. And we're seeing a big move now from longevity into the gym sector. So a lot of longevity gyms are getting into, a lot of gyms are getting into the longevity agenda now as well. Consumer diagnostics is a big part of this as well. This is helping people understand what's the difference between their biological and their chronological age. There's a lot of confusion in the space. It's still an emerging space, but really these companies that are moving into the point where you've got a valid biomarker test for age that works both in a consumer market, but also in a research and development market, that is going to be where a lot of companies are moving into the space. And those companies are attracting capital at the moment. Very exciting for us. We as a company today are going to be announcing our first move into the supplement space. And in terms of what we are doing and what others are doing in the industry is really using strong evidence behind the products that they are promoting, because some of these molecules are very strong and they have an effect on people as a food ingredient, which is what a supplement is. But likewise, a lot of these companies are now building clinical evidence so that they can actually be transferred into the clinical community as well as into medical care. So there's quite a lot of activity going on in the supplement space. Those companies that are using AI to identify unique molecules, they're big players in the space, but still very much emerging. And then, as I mentioned earlier, with supplements and clinics, the longevity clinical space is completely blowing up at the moment. Very exciting, lots of very interesting organizations being formed, big capital going into the space, growing interest from consumers. And of course, these clinicians are a key bridge for us to understand how we get into the longevity regimes that we need to protect our health span. Clinical experts are really important to that. And what we're seeing now is that there is an opportunity for all of the picks and shovels for that space to be actually developed. Operational IT systems, taking all this complex personalized data, putting it into care plans. I mentioned earlier the longevity gym and the luxury resorts are getting into this. And then likewise, there's a whole supply chain working now with these clinics that are either going to be supplement manufacturers or they're going to be equipment manufacturers. And they are emerging all around the world now with things like red light therapy and so on. So level 5 is when we get into the traditional management of aging diseases. And this is as close as we get to the current, what we would call a sick care paradigm. Obviously, we call healthcare the healthcare industry, but in many respects, what it's doing other than preventative activities is really helping people with an aging disease. So, of course, a lot of companies in the space, and we'll talk about those today, are using aging pathways to use a target disease as a way of actually getting the right clinical and as well as commercial pathway into the marketplace. But as you'll see later, we're seeing some companies now that are moving into these later stages of clinical development into phase 2B, where these can either be IPO targets or they could be acquisition targets for big pharma. Then, of course, you've got aging prevention, which, of course, is these diseases that we all get when we get over our 60s. If we can prevent those from happening, then all good. And, of course, those companies that are working on aging diseases are then working on preventative therapies. So this is very much the 4Ps, the preventative part of the 4Ps. Again, highly acquisitive targets in the future. And then we're going to be speaking to our first presenter today, Daniel Ives, and his organization are doing what we're talking about here, which is looking at targeted age reversal, which is working at a very complex cellular level to use partial cellular reprogramming to rewind a cell back to a earlier state while keeping its cellular identity, which means that you can actually then go from the potential of an individual organ and fast forward to the future to maybe being able to look at every cell in the body and do systemic age reversal, which is what we can see here. This is something that's attracting, again, a lot of attention, very scientifically complex. And we're seeing that really this is the specialist VC and ultra high net worth category of where money is going at the moment. As you can see here, xenotherapeutic and mitochondrial function dysfunction technologies are part of this. And we've got Kevin Slarman joining us today to talk about xenotherapeutics, which is the concept of being able to rejuvenate all of the cells in the body. So quick calibration point. The reality is that this is science that is still very early in many respects. So the key thing that we should all remember is people talk about is the longevity sector going to get its ChatGPT moment? Well, yes, but it's going to happen slowly. So the AI sector is away, as we all know. These guys have got regulators trying to catch up with them. The same with things like social media. The reality is that the longevity sector, whether it's in a clinical environment or even in a supplement environment, but very actively in a biotech environment, has got the regulatory pathways that it needs to go through. So there's always going to be a pace to this industry and the necessary quality checks that are required for any industry in this space when you're putting complex therapeutics into humans. So it's going to happen at a slow point. This is how Swiss Re, the big reinsurer, considers that regenerative medicine and likewise rejuvenation looks in terms of the timescales. Now, speak to anybody in the industry, and as we're going to do today, they're going to take a very different perspective of that. But the reality is, of course, is that this is complex science. So when we talk about longevity now and we talk about longevity next, the key thing is what does it look like between those two paradigms? So if we can't move that quickly, there are organizations that are working on organ preservation and organism preservation. So this is the concept of keeping the engine running while you're waiting for these therapeutics to come through. So we're seeing things like organ replacement, which of course has got some supply issues. So actually generating organs in, for example, in xenotransplantation, where you've got tailored organs being grown in donor animals. Likewise, 3D bioprinting, and there's even concepts out there about things like head transplants. So there's some concepts out there that are on the peripheral end that are quite interesting from a technical as well as a commercial perspective. And I'm delighted to say that we've got Emil joining us today to talk about something which is really a trend that's come back in from the 70s and 80s, which is cryopreservation or corporal preservation. So the concept here, of course, is can you, if things are too late, can you get to the point where you are resuscitating the body to the point where it can be re-engaged when these therapies come through, whether that's going to be 5, 10, 30 years or whatever it may be. So we're seeing now a lot of trend between the updates on how cryotherapy works, and I'll let Emil talk about that, but also the concepts of even digital immortality with the advent of brain-computer interfaces, quantum computing and AI. There is the inexorable move of us much closer to machines. So this concept of the singularity might be something that could to come into play there. So that's a quick spin through. As I say, if you want my slides, I'll make sure that you get those as part of the pack afterwards, or if you took my QR, please reach out to me for that.